9 million.
Yeah.
Well, that's one estimate for the number of empty homes in Japan.
Or, yeah, maybe closer to 8.5 million from a few years back. Either way.
Either way, it's just an absolutely mind-boggling figure. What on earth is going on?
It really is a startling number, and it points to a really interesting, quite complex phenomenon we're diving into today.
Good.
We're looking at this whole issue of vacant, underused homes, mostly in Japan, where they even have a specific word for them, a kia.
Fekia. Got it.
But we're also going to look at a similar situation that seems to be developing in South Korea, too.
Right. Because, we all hear the headlines coming out of East Asia, low birth rates, aging populations, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we want to dig a bit deeper. Yeah. We want to understand exactly how these big demographic shifts are actually playing out in the housing landscape.
Like, what are the real reasons behind all these empty houses?
Exactly. What are the consequences on the ground? And maybe, just maybe, are there some unexpected opportunities popping up because of this?
Yep. And we'll be looking at quite a mix of sources, right? News reports, some academic stuff, even what people are saying online.
Yeah, trying to get a well-rounded picture. So let's start with Japan then. That scale, potentially 9 million vacant homes. It's almost hard to grasp.
It really is. And like you hinted, it's not just a problem out in the remote countryside anymore.
No, apparently the BBC was saying these IKEAs are increasingly showing up in big cities too,
Yeah.
like Tokyo and Osaka,
Right.
which, feels counterintuitive.
It does. So what's the core driver? Why so many empty houses in such a, densely populated country?
What's behind it all?
Well, there are several factors, and they're kind of interconnected. Probably the biggest one is just the demographics, the declining and aging population,
Okay.
fewer babies being born, and sadly, a growing number of older people passing away. And sometimes there's no direct heir or no one who wants the property.
Right. That whole phenomenon of lonely deaths you sometimes read about that directly contributes then.
It absolutely does. It adds to the stock of these empty, unclaimed homes.
That's quite poignant. And then there's the drift from the countryside, isn't there? People moving to the cities for work or opportunities.
Definitely. Urbanization is another major piece of the puzzle. Homes get left behind in villages.
I remember seeing that story about Nagoro Village, the one with all the dolls.
Oh, yeah. Where they replaced residents who'd left or passed away with life-size dolls.
It's so striking.
Yeah.
Kind of creative, but also really stark,
Yeah.
A visual depopulation.
Absolutely. It really illustrates that trend. And then, beyond demographics and urbanization, there's a fascinating cultural aspect in Japan.
Which is,
A really strong preference for new homes, brand new construction.
oh, interesting. Unlike here, where an older house can have character and value.
Exactly. In Japan, historically, maybe there were issues with older building standards, but there's also this cultural value placed on newness.
Uh-huh.
It often makes older existing homes less attractive in the market.
Wow, okay. That's a huge cultural difference with pretty significant economic consequences.
It is. And speaking of economics, there are other factors too, like how homes in Japan tend to depreciate in value over time.
Right, which is the opposite of what many people in, say, the U.S. or Europe expect.
Precisely. So you inherit a property that's possibly losing value, and then you face the costs of, managing it, clearing it out, maybe repairs, navigating the legal stuff.
It all adds up.
It really does. And unfortunately, for some families, simply abandoning the property can seem like the easier or, less costly option.
Just walk away.
Effectively, yeah. And some reports, like one from eHousing, mention that even the tax system can sometimes make it harder or less appealing to fix up an older place.
So it all kind of pushes towards neglect in some cases.
It can certainly contribute.
Okay, so millions of empty homes. It's obviously not just about looking a bit untidy. What are the actual, real-world problems caused by all these IKEA?
Yeah, it's definitely more than just aesthetics. They cause quite a few issues. Vacant properties can lead to urban decay, blight on the streets, as places like the BBC have pointed out.
Makes sense.
But more seriously, they can become safety hazards. Think about Japan being prone to earthquakes.
Oh, wow, yeah. I hadn't even thought of that.
The recent Noto Peninsula earthquake was a tragic reminder. Older, maybe structurally weak, vacant buildings can collapse, potentially damaging neighboring properties, even blocking vital roads for emergency services.
Well, that's serious.
Very. And beyond the physical dangers, there's also this loss of community spirit. In areas where lots of homes are empty, the social fabric starts to fray.
Yeah, you lose that vibrancy. Okay, it sounds like a really naughty problem with lots of layers. So What's being done? Are authorities trying to tackle this?
They are, yes, in various ways. Some local governments are getting quite creative, actually.
How so?
Well, the BBC mentioned cases where they're practically giving homes away for free or offering really significant financial incentives to get people to move in.
Giving homes away for free.
Hmm.
What's the catch there?
Yeah. Well, usually there are strings attached. You probably have to renovate it significantly, maybe live there for a certain number of years. But the idea is clear. Repopulate these areas, revitalize them.
Right. Bring life back.
Exactly. And on a bigger scale, the Asian News Network reported a nationwide government effort. Multiple ministries involved, looking at revising laws, improving management systems for these empty buildings, especially out in rural areas.
So a top-down approach, too.
Yes. And e-housing also mentioned financial help being available for renovations and even support for people willing to relocate to the countryside.
Okay, so it's a major challenge, but there are definitely some responses happening.
Yeah.
And I also saw something about new trends, like foreign buyers getting interested.
Yeah, that's a really interesting side effect, you could say. Foreign buyers are noticing these IKEA.
Because they're cheap.
Primarily, yes. The prices can be incredibly low compared to property in their home countries. So they see potential, maybe create an affordable home or start a small business like a guest house.
Right. The BBC mentioned that for some it's more of a lifestyle thing, getting a foothold in Japan, or just getting more space for their money.
Exactly that, a different kind of opportunity.
And the tourism angle makes sense, too. Converting old houses into cafes or B&Bs. I think that BBC piece mentioned someone called Anton doing projects like that.
Yes, Anton's IKEA projects were highlighted as an example of that kind of creative reuse, bringing economic activity back.
Injecting new life.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but wait, while we're talking about population decline causing empty homes, you also mentioned property prices in Tokyo and Osaka have been increasing. That seems, well, contradictory.
It does seem that way on the surface, doesn't it? But yeah, reports are showing price growth in the major metro areas.
How does that work then?
Well, a few things seem to be going on. One report called Japan's Tokyo and Osaka are #1, talked about the Japanese real estate market recovering well post-pandemic and still being seen as sort of undervalued globally.
Ah, so international investment perspective.
Partly. And another analysis focusing on Osaka compared it with Tokyo. Both are growing, but Tokyo's growing even stronger, though Osaka is still more affordable as an investment.
Okay.
Plus, the Tokyo residential real estate market analysis for 2024 specifically pointed to a big influx of foreign money into Tokyo's residential property market.
I see. So it's almost like two different housing realities happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
Rural areas struggling with vacancies, while the big city hubs are still hot markets.
That's a pretty good way to put it, yeah. A real divergence. And that same Tokyo analysis also mentioned shifts in demand. Fewer young first-time buyers, maybe, but a growing need for senior housing options.
Ah, the aging population creating new demands. Makes sense.
Definitely. And one more little interesting point that came up in, I think it was a Reddit discussion, apparently. There's been an uptick in villa sales compared to apartments recently.
Villas, like detached houses.
Yeah. Could suggest maybe a shift in preference, perhaps people wanting more space, maybe remote work playing a role. It's hard to say for sure, but it's a trend people noticed.
Interesting. Okay, that gives us a pretty detailed look at Japan's situation. Complex. Now, let's pivot to South Korea. We know they face similar demographic issues. Is a parallel problem with empty homes emerging there, too?
Yes, it seems so. The Asian News Network reported a growing number of unused homes there as well, again, particularly in rural areas, and directly linked it to their really significant population drop.
And like Japan, the government is responding.
Yes, they're taking it seriously. A similar nationwide effort is underway involving various ministries, looking at laws and management systems for vacant properties. They see the trend lines.
And South Korea's fertility rate is famously low, isn't it? Like the lowest in the world.
It is. That's really the crux of the issue there. Think Global Health laid out some truly stark figures. It was 0.78 births per woman in 2022.
0.78. Wow.
Dropped to 0.72 in 2023. And the projection for 2024 was maybe 0.68. Long-term forecasts aren't much better.
Goodness, that's dramatic.
It is. And understandably, it's causing huge concern about the future of their real estate market.
Yeah, I mean, basic supply and demand, right? If the population keeps shrinking that fast, eventually demand for housing just has to fall off.
That's the core worry. You see it discussed on places like Reddit and in Korean news reports like one from Lancia. There's this fear of a potential collapse in property values.
Especially outside the big cities, I imagine.
Exactly. Particularly in non-metropolitan areas, the risk seems highest as the overall population shrinks.
It must make young people in Korea really question whether buying property is a smart long-term move. I
Mhm.
saw some of that debate online, like, what's the real value of an older apartment in Seoul if the population is declining, especially with high redevelopment costs?
It's a very real dilemma. And yeah, those Reddit threads captured that uncertainty. But interestingly, some argue that even with an overall decline,
Yes.
the population might just become even more concentrated in the big urban centers, particularly Seoul.
Like a centralization effect.
Kind of. There is one discussion titled something like, If Korea is headed to becoming a huge city-state, suggesting exactly that, pointing out that over half the population already lives in the Seoul-gyeonggi area.
Wow, over 50%.
Yeah, so that concentration might help prop up property values in those key areas, even if other regions decline.
So potentially a similar dynamic to Japan again.
Yeah.
Big cities stay resilient, rural areas face the brunt.
It seems like a plausible scenario, yes, a parallel trend. And of course, the South Korean government is trying hard to tackle the root cause, that incredibly low birth rate.
What are they doing on that front?
Well, think global health detailed various measures: financial incentives for having kids, better parental leave policies, housing support for families with newborns, classic pronatalist policies.
Right, to encourage births.
Yeah.
But how effective are those policies really? Isn't there a lot of debate about that?
There is, yes, a lot of debate. The Think Global Health piece noted that many experts are skeptical. They argue that just throwing money at the problem, these short-term incentives, probably won't change fundamental decisions about having children.
Right, it's deeper than that.
They suggest focusing on deeper societal issues might be more effective. Things like better gender equality, more opportunities for women, tackling the notoriously long working hours, the high cost of education and childcare.
So systemic changes rather than just cash handout.
That's the argument. Addressing the underlying pressures and costs that discourage people from starting or expanding families.
It sounds like a massive societal challenge, much bigger than just housing policy. And are the impacts of the low birth rate already visible?
Oh, absolutely. That Korean news report, Bonewoff, mentioned things like obstetrics and gynecology clinics closing down in some areas because there just aren't enough births.
Right.
And schools are being consolidated too as student numbers fall. These are very real, tangible consequences happening now.
But hang on, wasn't there one place bucking the trend? I think I read something about Incheon.
Ah, yes. That's a really interesting outlier. A report in Odion highlighted Incheon. Apparently, it's the only major city in South Korea that's actually seeing growth right now, both in population and economically.
Really? How are they managing that?
It seems to be down to very proactive local policies. They've put in place really comprehensive support for childbirth and childcare.
Like what specifically?
Things like help with transport costs for pregnant women and quite ambitious financial support programs for kids at different ages. Something called the I plus 100 million dream policy was mentioned.
And it's working.
Apparently so. Incheon actually saw births increase going against the national trend. It's quite a remarkable case study showing focused local efforts can potentially make a difference.
That's fascinating. A little glimmer of hope, maybe. And one last thing for South Korea, a growing senior housing market.
Yes, that follows logically from the demographics. With the population aging so rapidly, a report by JLL mentions South Korea is heading towards being super-aged soon.
Super aged, right.
There's naturally growing demand and investment in housing specifically designed for seniors, mostly concentrated, again, around Seoul and the surrounding Gyeonggi province.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. In Japan, we have this huge issue of akiya, these vacant homes, driven by demographics, sure, but also unique cultural factors like preferring new builds and economic issues like depreciation.
Right, leading to problems like urban decay, safety hazards, especially with earthquakes, but also sparking some innovation, local governments giving away homes, foreign buyers stepping in, new uses like tourism.
And alongside that, a kind of split market, with major city centers like Tokyo and Osaka still seeing price growth,
Yeah.
partly fueled by foreign investment, even while other areas struggle.
Exactly. Then in South Korea, a similar story of rising unused homes, again, especially rural, driven by that world record low fertility rate.
Causing real anxiety about future property values, though, again, the big cities like Seoul might hold up better due to population concentration.
Mm-hmm. And the government's trying pronatalist policies, but their effectiveness is questioned, with deeper societal issues possibly needing attention. We're already seeing impacts like clinic and school closures.
But with exceptions like Incheon showing targeted local policies can work, and the emergence of a senior housing market as the population ages.
So in both countries, while the situations have unique aspects, a core theme seems to be it's often less about a lack of houses and more about a lack of people in certain areas or for certain types of housing.
It's a truly fascinating and, yeah, sometimes sobering look at how these huge demographic waves can completely reshape housing, communities, entire landscapes, whether you, listening, are in a country facing similar shifts or just curious about global trends.
Hmm.
This story of vacant homes really gives you a powerful lens onto societal change, doesn't it? And maybe offers clues about the future of how and where we live.
It really does. And maybe it leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. As populations around the world continue to shift, age, and sometimes shrink, how might our very idea of home or community need to change too?
That's a big question.
It is. Could these challenges, like millions of empty homes, actually push us towards new, maybe more innovative ways of living, of investing, of building communities that we haven't even really thought about yet? Something profound to mull over.